What if a man officially declared dead suddenly appeared alive more than a decade later? Not a legend, not a ghost story, a real court case. In 1909, an Indian prince was reported dead. His body was said to have been cremated. But more than a decade later, a mysterious ascetic appeared in Dhaka. And some people believed they were looking at the same man. His name was Ramendra Narayan Roy. He was the second prince of the wealthy Bhawal estate near Dhaka, in what was then British India. Ramendra was born into a world of wealth, land, status, and inherited power. He was not an ordinary man whose disappearance could simply go unnoticed. But in 1909, his life took a dangerous turn. Ramendra was suffering from syphilis, and he traveled to Darjeeling seeking treatment. He was accompanied by his wife, Bhawal Devi, and her brother, Satyendranath Banerjee. Darjeeling was supposed to be a place of treatment. Instead, it became the setting for one of the strangest deaths in South Asian legal history. Ramendra's health deteriorated, and on May 7, 1909, he was reportedly declared dead. The official cause was biliary colic, severe pain associated with gallstones. The following day, his body was reportedly taken for cremation. For most people, that should have been the end. A death had been recorded. A body had been taken for cremation. A powerful family had lost one of its heirs. There was nothing left to question. Or so it seemed. Because years later, history would ask a disturbing question. What if the official story was wrong? After Ramendra's supposed death, the Bhawal family entered a period of upheaval. Two of his brothers also died soon afterward. With the family weakened, the British colonial court of wards took control of the Bhawal estate. And for more than a decade, Ramendra's death remained the accepted story. Then around 1920 or 1921, something happened in Dhaka that changed everything. A Sannyasi appeared. He was a wandering ascetic. But people began noticing something strange. He looked remarkably like the man who had supposedly died in Darjeeling more than a decade earlier. At first, the question was simple. Who was this mysterious stranger? But soon, the question became much more disturbing. Could this actually be the dead prince? The appearance of the Sannyasi created attention. Eventually, the Sannyasi made an extraordinary claim. He said he was Ramendra Narayan Roy, the man who had supposedly died more than a decade earlier. But as people connected his appearance with the deceased Kumar, the mystery grew. Eventually, the Sannyasi claimed that he was Ramendra Narayan Roy. He alleged that he had been poisoned and left for dead. He claimed that his cremation had been interrupted by a sudden hailstorm before it was completed. According to his account, Naga Sadhus found him, revived him, and cared for him. He said he then lived for years as an ascetic. During that time, he claimed to have suffered partial memory loss. Eventually, he returned to society. It was a claim almost impossible to accept. Yet the physical resemblance was difficult for some people to dismiss, and the Bhawal family itself became divided. Ramendra's wife, Bhawal Devi, refused to acknowledge the Sannyasi as her husband. She maintained that he was an impostor. But Ramendra's sister Jyotirmayi became convinced that the man was genuinely her brother. Two people who had known the same Kumar reached completely opposite conclusions. And that created the central mystery of the entire case. Was this a grieving family's impossible hope? A calculated impersonation? Or had the official story of Ramendra's death been wrong? The British colonial administration did not accept his claim. The Court of Wards rejected the idea that the Sannyasi was the dead Kumar. So the question moved from family arguments into a courtroom. The claimant did not simply make his accusation and walk away. He filed a lawsuit. And what followed became an enormous legal examination of one question. Was the Sannyasi really Ramendra Narayan Roy? The trial began in the 1930s, and it lasted 608 days. More than 1,000 witnesses became part of the proceedings. Think about that. Hundreds of days in court. More than 1,000 people giving evidence. And all of it centered on the identity of one man. The court couldn't simply ask whether he looked like the Kumar. It needed evidence that could connect the stranger to the man who had supposedly died more than a decade earlier. So investigators began looking for clues on his body. Scars, smallpox marks, old injury deformities. Every identifying mark mattered. The question was simple. Could these physical details match what was known about Ramendra's body? But the evidence was far from simple. The administration opposed the claim. Bhawal continued to reject the man, and his extraordinary account of surviving the alleged poisoning and incomplete cremation had to be weighed against the official record of his death. This was no longer a simple family dispute. It had become a battle between official records and personal recognition, between a reported death and a living claimant, between what institutions believed had happened and what some people believed they were seeing with their own eyes. After hundreds of days of testimony, the court finally reached its decision. In 1936, the trial court ruled in favor of the claimant. The man who had appeared in Dhaka as a wandering sannyasi had won the first major judgment supporting his claim to be Ramendra Narayan Roy. For those who believed him, it was a stunning validation. For those who considered him an impostor, it was a shocking reversal. But the case was far from over. The decision did not end the dispute. The case was appealed to the Calcutta High Court. The evidence was examined again. And once again, the result favored the claimant. A majority of the judges upheld the trial court's ruling. But even that was not the final word. The case went even further. It reached the Privy Council in London, the highest court of appeal for many parts of the British Empire at the time. The question that had begun with one family near Dhaka had now reached the heart of the British legal system. And in 1946, the Privy Council also ruled in favor of the claimant. After decades of uncertainty, the legal battle was finally over. The courts had accepted his claim. But the victory came with a remarkable final twist. The man who had spent years fighting to prove who he was would not have much time to live after the final ruling. In 1946, shortly afterward, he died. He had spent decades trying to answer one question. Who was he? And the courts had finally given their answer. 1234. So, was the Sannyasi really the lost Kumar of Bhawal? The courts ultimately said yes. But the historical record has never completely erased the doubt. The debate remains, was the Sannyasi genuinely Ramendra Narayan Roy, or an impostor who convinced a vast number of people and ultimately the courts that he was someone else? That is what makes the Bhawal Sannyasi case so fascinating. It challenges a belief most people rarely question, that once someone is officially declared dead, the story is finished. Here, the official record said one thing. A living man claimed another. A family was divided. The colonial administration rejected him. More than 1,000 witnesses became part of the trial. And at 3 stages of the legal battle, the courts ultimately supported his claim. And still, more than a century later, the mystery remains. Perhaps the most unsettling part is not that a man may have returned from the dead. It is that even after one of the longest and most extraordinary identity trials in colonial India, we are still asking the same question. Who was the man who walked into Dhaka? The dead Kumar? Or an extraordinarily convincing stranger? Now imagine you were sitting in that courtroom. Would you have believed him? Or would you have called him an impostor? Tell me your verdict in the comments. And if you enjoy real historical mysteries where the evidence is stranger than fiction, subscribe for more stories where the official story was never quite the end.